Hi, everyone. Happy Friday and welcome to today's immigration chat. I am Attorney Lilian Chukura. I am the attorney and owner of Lily Legal, where we help our clients get status for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So, today I want to talk to you about who U.S. citizens can file for. Um, this topic is coming up again because I've had so many of my clients become citizens and have this question. They want to know, who can I file for and what is the process? So I thought I will do a video just talking about that. And if you have any questions, as always, put them in the comments. I do go back and look at those. If you're not watching live, thank you for watching. And if you would like to schedule a private consultation with me, you can do that. All my contact information is in the description to this video, and you can call the number that's also on the screen. So let's jump right in. First off, US citizens, congratulations, you're a US citizen. You've went through the process. If you were an immigrant, you went through the process of green card, and now you're a citizen and you want to know, who can I file for? I have all these family members that think I can file for them, but who can I actually file for? And you will be surprised the misinformation that's out there about who US citizens can actually file for. It is crazy. I've had people tell me that they want to file for their grandparents, that they can file for their uncles, or, and they're getting pressure from family members that are not in the US and don't really know the US immigration system. And they just want to know who they can file for so that they can actually start the process or let family members know that they don't actually qualify to file for them. So let's jump right in. First group of people that US citizens can file for is, of course, their spouse, right? A US citizen can file for their spouse. Doesn't matter when you got married. You could have gotten married before you became a US citizen or after you became a US citizen. You can still file for your spouse. Your spouse will now be considered an immediate relative of a US citizen, which is the fastest route to getting a green card in the US. Okay. So whether your spouse is in the US or outside of the US is just going to determine the process that you go through. If your spouse is in the US and came into the US with a visa, it would be quicker than if your spouse came into the US without a visa. Okay. So that is one of the things that you need to consider before you even start the process. And when people come to me, that's one of the first things I ask is, how did your spouse come into the US if they're already in the US, right? Because that tells me how complex the process is going to be and the steps that need to take place. The other thing to keep in mind is, if your spouse is outside of the US, that it's going to take a bit longer, right? Because now not only is USCIS involved, the State Department is also involved in the process. So the State Department is the actual place that the embassy is under, right? So the State Department is the one that's actually doing the interview at the embassy. USCIS is determining whether this person is actually your spouse, whether they qualify as a spouse, and then they send the case over to the State Department. So in that process, there could be delays, right? Because it's two separate agencies talking to each other. Okay. But if your spouse is already in the US and has a visa, and came in with a visa, you are only dealing with USCIS. If your spouse came into the US without a visa, not only do you have to deal with USCIS, you also have to deal with the State Department, so the embassy. So that's where people, say, oh, do I have to leave the US to get a green card? Sometimes you do, depending on how you came into the US. Okay. So that's the first group that US citizens can file for, and that's their spouse. The second group is their children. Okay. And children are broken into two, actually, three categories, right? There's children that are under 21 and unmarried. Those are considered immediate relatives, just like children, just like spouses of US citizens. Children of US citizens that are under 21 and unmarried are considered immediate relatives. So the and unmarried part is really important. Okay. You need to pay attention to that because once a child gets married, even if they're 18 years old and they get married, they are no longer considered a child for immediate relative purposes. Okay. So now they go into a different category. So, like I said, first category is under 21 and unmarried. Second category is over 21 and unmarried. And the third category is married children. Okay. Those are how USCIS breaks it down. That's how the State Department breaks it down. Okay. The timing of how long is it going to take to bring the child to the US is determined by which category they fall into. And that's where it really matters because sometimes people will ask me, oh, can I file for my children? The answer is always yes, you can file for them. The question becomes, how long is it going to take, right? If they are still under 21 and are married, that is the quickest route for children of US citizens to get to the US and get their green card. The second fastest is over 21 but unmarried. The second you get married, there's less visas available, which means there's a huge backlog. Um, but but what I tell everyone is if you have a child that's over 21, that's married, right? You're not just filing for them, right? They're no longer considered immediate relatives, which means when they get a visa to the US, their children, if they decide to have any, and their spouse, if they're still married at the time, would also be able to get a visa. Okay? Their children that are under 21 and their spouse will be able to get a visa with them. So now you're not just filing for your son or your daughter or your child, you're also able to then have um, your grandchildren and your child's spouse also be able to enter the US from filing one application. So instead of looking at the number of years it's going to take, and it does, I'm not going to lie to you, it takes time. Okay. It can take over 10 years for a married child of a US citizen to get a visa to the US. But just know if they are able to get that visa and they have children that are under 21, their children can come with them, follow to join. And now the entire family is able to benefit from that one application. So, needless to say, if that is a situation you're in and you're just wondering if it's even worth it, think about it in that sense that it's not just one person. It's if they decide to have children, if they decide to um, get married, they can come with their family, not just your child coming. Okay, you are basically looking out for their future. Think about it that way and don't just look at how long in years it's going to take. Just think about how's their life going to change in 10 years. Will this still benefit them? Yes, most definitely go ahead and file. Okay, so we talked about spouses, we talked about children. Now let's talk about parents, right? That's the next category of people that US citizens can file for. So US citizens can file for their biological parents and their step parents and their adoptive parents. Now, if a US citizen is adopted, legally adopted, their birth parents, their biological parents, will no longer have rights under immigration law. So once the child that's now a US citizen is adopted, legally adopted, their parents, now their adoptive parents, are their parents for immigration purposes. Their birth parents cannot benefit from any immigration filing that the child does. Okay, so that's why I break it into that three categories. So their step parents, biological parents, and adoptive parents. Those are the ones that can benefit, but an adoptive parent and a biological parent cannot get that. Okay, so once you give up your rights or you lose your rights through adoption, your child can no longer file for you. So keep that in mind um, as you're making decisions or trying to figure out if you can file for a specific family member. Just know that's just the rules. I know there are open adoptions where the adopted child knows who their birth parents are. Unfortunately, even though they have that relationship, legally they do not have a parent child relationship to get benefits. Okay, so step parents can also get benefits from their stepchild that's now a US citizen, as long as, right, as long as the marriage that created that step parent stepchild relationship took place before the child turned 18. So if you are the step parent and you got married to the biological parent when the child was 16, right? Even though now the child is 21 and living their life, they can still file for you as the step parent, okay? Because that's just the requirements. That's it, right? So just pay attention to that as well, okay? US citizen children can file for their step parents as long as the marriage that created that relationship took place before the US citizen child turned 18. If it's the day after their 18th birthday that you got married, unfortunately, it no longer counts for immigration purposes. If it's the day before their 18th birthday, it counts. So that's just how immigration looks at it. It's a very fine line. It's either you're 18 and over or you're under 18. Okay. And you need to be under 18 for it to count. And you have to show, if let's say the step parent and the biological parents are no longer married, so they've gotten a divorce or there's death in the family, the step parent can still get benefits from the stepchild if they have maintained a relationship. So that's something else to keep in mind, is that even if the parent, that the biological parent, is no longer married to the step parent, that step parent stepchild relationship that was created is still there, right? You can still get immigration benefits from that, but you have to maintain that relationship and you have to show that you have maintained that relationship. Okay, so again, US citizen children can file for their parents, their step parents, and their adoptive parents. One thing to keep in mind is that in order for a US citizen child to file for a parent, they have to be 21. Okay. So anyone can become a US citizen at 18, right? You can file for, you can file at 18 to become a US citizen. However, you cannot file for a parent until you're 21. But you can file for a spouse, you can file for your children, at any age, right? So as long as you're 18, you're a US citizen, you can file for your spouse, you can file for your children, but you cannot file for your parents until you're 21. Again, that's just the rules, okay? I don't make them. And I have people that are just like, oh, my child is 19 right now. What do I do? You just have to wait, right? That there's really nothing they can do. Your child can't file for you. Um, It's not their fault, right? It's not because they don't want to file for you. It's just the way the law is written is very black and white, right? Must be 21. And if they're 19, you still have 2 years to go. Okay. On their 21st birthday, you can put in that application. Okay. That's just something to keep in mind. Now, the last category of people that US citizens can file for are their fiance. So if you have a fiance and you've seen each other within the last 2 years, and now you want to file for um, for them to come to the US, but you're not getting married outside of the US first, there's a fiance visa option available to you where you file for them as your fiance. They come in, you get married within 90 days of them coming in, and then you apply for a green card for them. So that is basically, yeah, that's a quick rundown of the fiance visa. And yes, you have to be a US citizen to get a fiance visa. I've had people that are permanent residents come to me and they tell me, I have a fiance. I want to file for him or her to come to the US. How do I do that? And the answer, my first question is always, when do you qualify to become a citizen? Right? Because if you do not want to travel and get married, if that's not something you two are planning on doing anytime soon, then the next thing is, when are you becoming a US citizen? Because you must be a US citizen to file for a fiance. And the good thing about filing for a fiance is if your fiance has a child, the child can also come with your fiance at the same time instead of filing two separate applications. Okay. So of getting married, bringing your fiance, bringing your wife, and then filing for the child, you can do it in one go with a fiance visa. Again, one thing to keep in mind is, right, immediate relatives of US citizens. So that's the spouse, children that are under 21 and are married, and their parents of US citizens. They are considered immediate relatives. That means that if, let's say, you have a child that's 19 and your 19-year-old child also has like a 2-year-old child of their own, when you file for them, because they're now considered an immediate relative of a US citizen, the child that's 2 years old cannot just travel with the parent. Okay. You may need the parent will need to come to the US, get their green card, and then file for the child to come and join them. And that's something that's hard for people to like really think about. Or if a US citizen is filing for their parents and they also have siblings that are under 21, maybe they're 15, 16, they still need their parents, but the parents want to come to the US. It becomes a question of, okay, how do we make it work, right? Who are the children going to stay with? Because the US citizen can file for the siblings, but it's going to take some time. Right now, it's taking like almost 13 years. So it's something to keep in mind that if you're filing for your parents, they're considered immediate relatives, which means if they have children that are minors that they would like to come with them, unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to. They would need to come here, get their green card, and then file for the child and wait through that process for the child to get here. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. The final category of people that US citizens can file for is their siblings. So, siblings, brothers, sisters, you can file for them. Doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter if they're married or not, it does not matter. Siblings go in one category. There's no separation in that. So, however, like I mentioned before, those categories can take time. Okay, can take up to 13 years. But again, just like married children of US citizens, even though it's going to take time, they can come with their spouse if they're married at the time. They can come with their children that are unmarried and under 21. So there's still benefits to file in. Um, Maybe the biggest benefit won't be to your siblings directly, but once they come to the US and they're able to come with your family, that means your nieces and nephews will be able to benefit from that one application that you did. So that's something to keep in mind as you're figuring out who to file for and looking at the processing times and the visa bulletin. It's going to take time. Okay. This, when people come to me and they say, I want to file for my siblings, I I just pull up the visa bulletin. I tell them exactly you know, what cases they're processing right now. And we do the calculation. The last calculation I did was looking like 13 years. And the person freaked out. They're like, that is too long. I'm like, yes, but think about it. If you file once you become a citizen, I've had people that have been citizens for like 10, 15 years come to me now wanting to file for their family members. I'm like, well, you know, if you file the second you become a citizen, they would have been close to getting a green card by now. Right. So just think about it that way. You can file it and just forget it. One thing I tell people is something to consider is if you're going to file for a family member and it's going to take time, like 10 years, 15, 13 years, you don't necessarily have to get there, let them know that you're filing it, because it's usually the person that you're filing for that's going to continuously ask you, like, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? And then you freak out because you're like, why is it taking so long? They should be here by now. But you can file a relative petition for them without them necessarily having to know that you filed it. And then once it gets to the visa stage, they will have to then be involved. So just keep that in mind. On the initial application that goes to USCIS, it's you, the US citizen, that's putting in the information, right? You may need some information from your relatives, but they don't have to sign any documents. To start the process. Basically, you are deciding to start the process, and then once it gets to the visa stage, they take over. They have to actually go to the interview and present the documentation that's required to get the visa. So that's something else you can think about to just give yourself peace of mind, because we all know once you tell people that you're filing for them, they become anxious and they want to check in like every day. How's it going? When am I going to get the visa? Have you put in the application? All this stuff. So you may want to consider that while you're filing. And again, that's something I talk to my clients about when we're starting the process, so that they are not, bombarded with questions, and they know this is going to take time. And I give them that option of just filing and then letting their family members know once it's ready for the next stage, which is the actual visa application at the embassy. Okay. So you do have that option to keep your peace of mind. And, if you're working with me or another lawyer, you can ask them to do that so that you can keep your peace of mind for a little bit longer before it's time for the visa part. Okay. So that is a quick, well, I try to make it a quick rundown of who US citizens can file for. I'm just going to do a quick overview. Again, their spouse, their parents, including step parents and adoptive parents, their children, including children that are under 21, over 21, and married. Okay. They can file for their fiance and they can file for their siblings, no matter if the siblings are married or not. Okay. So if you have any questions about that, please go ahead, put them in the comments. I do go back and look at those and answer your questions. If you want to schedule a consultation with me, you can do that by calling the number on the screen or booking directly using the link in the description to this video. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and be with me today. If you do have questions, do not hesitate to ask. That's what these lives are for, is for you to ask me questions. But yeah, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time. And remember, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you know someone who needs to hear this, go ahead and share this video with them. And if you are watching in a place where you can subscribe, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you do not miss any of my uploads. And once again, I am Lilian Chukura. I am the owner of Lily Legal, where we do immigration law and we do it well. Bye for now.